Hi, this is Greg. Welcome to this week's episode of the Syncopator Familius podcast. I wanted to do a little something different this week and read a couple of poems that I wrote maybe like about 5 years ago and then discuss them. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one now. Two Swords, a poem of redemption. See, Lord, here are two swords. Is that enough? Is that enough to slice open my brother's flesh and watch his life slowly ebb? Is that enough to pierce the heart of my sister with searing pain? I open my mouth, and the glistening edges make their wounds. My hand glides with precision to ensure a lasting mark. I will leave no survivors. I am a master. Little do I realize I am falling on my own blade. That is enough, you reply. It is your scarred hand upon my bloodthirsty one that fashions my killing machine into an instrument of growth. The very blade that spilled the blood of my fellow man now tills the soil to raise new life. Your own sword divides my flesh and spirit. That is enough. Cell, a poem of new life. I am held in this cell I cannot escape. It's been so long I cannot even conceive when I began. Light comes in, and sound, but it is no use to me. The walls have become so calloused nothing touches them. I waste away on the cold, hard cell floor. The cold, hard self-lore. Sold my soul for a facade. Change on the outside, chains on the inside. A piece falls. It splits the cell and gives me life. Salt and brightness shine from me. I am Onesimus. A bloody hand pushes through the rubble to pull me free, nourishes me with bread and wine, wedding brine. He pays my debt, keys to a mansion, to a man's son. Okay, so like I said, those were a couple of poems that I wrote. The first one, Two Swords, was written in 2012. Cell, that's Cell, was written in 2013. And as I'm recording this, it is 2018, so approximately 5-6 years ago that these were written. Um, and at the time, I saw them as very uplifting because I was coming out of a very like valley, I guess you would call it in the spiritual walk. You have your peaks and your valleys, and I was kind of coming out of a long valley there, and saw that I was in a darker spiritual place than I wanted to be. And I just mean by like not following. I don't mean I was doing any dark, horrible things, but just more that it felt that way. Just not a closeness in my walk with God as I had wanted. And I was coming out of this, and I was writing about it, and so I saw these as very at the time very uplifting poems, but looking back on them, I just came across them again recently and read back over them. They seemed a little more dark to me now, but that's probably good on my part because I feel like I've gone places, spiritually, in recent months, and so that I feel a lot more closer to God. So when I look at these, they seem a little depressing to me now, but or at least they did when I first read them. But as I've decided to read them on the podcast and talk about them, I had to read them over a few times and took a few takes to get them correct. So I've read them several times, and I'm a little more at peace with them, I guess, than I was even before I started to read them for the podcast. But so I guess it depends on if you listen to them, and I mean, you may think they're stupid. So in that case, they mean nothing to you. But if they mean anything to you, they may, it just depend on where you are in your life right now, whether they sound hopeful, they sound depressing. But like I said, I'm more at peace with them as the more I read them over and over. And not to say I'm a great poet or anything, I'm not, but I'm better at. I think when I'm like a lot of people, it's like I can write poetry more when I'm coming from more of a dark place, and then I can write essays or happier stuff if I'm in a better place. So like if I tried to write a poem right now, it would be horrible. And like I said, you may think these were horrible anyway, but you would really think one I would write right now would be horrible. So even I would agree. And anyway, but I think they are hopeful because it kind of the two swords one, of course, comes from the Garden of Gethsemane scene where Jesus is with the disciples before he's arrested, and he gives them the line, it's like, if any of you has a sword, have it. And so they say, look, Lord, here are two swords, and he says that is enough, and we don't know what that means exactly when he said that but we do know that's what he said. And so this is kind of based on that, and of course the fact that how I've used my sword. Peter uses one of those swords later in the scene to cut off the ear of one of the people who've come after them, and in one account, Jesus puts the ear back on and heals it. And so that's kind of the basis for this, and draws in some other areas as well. I don't want to interpret the whole thing for you. Yeah, if it's of interest to you, you can do that yourself. And Cell kind of has a similar theme to it. But anyway, I kind of just want to leave them and let them speak for themselves, I guess. There's some wordplay in them, and especially in Cell. So I will put the link to where you can read these. These appeared on my old blog. It's still up. I don't write that much in it anymore, but it was the Syncopator Familius blog, and it says by Owen 2, and that's a pen name I use sometimes and to write. And so it's still on the blog under those, and I'll put a link if you want to read them for yourself. And then, of course, there's also my southern accent, which might make them a little hard to follow for some people. So you can, if you do want to read them, you can read them in your own voice that way, and just wipe out of your memory the reading I just gave. And if you want to leave any comments or share any thoughts about it, you can. If you're listening on Anchor, you can do that, and I will definitely see it on Anchor. I can't promise any of the other platforms that I will definitely see your note. Perhaps also on Castbox, I may see it because I am use Castbox as well. But definitely you can do it on my Twitter feed, which is at Owen2, and that is spelled OWENTEW. And if you find Owen2, and then it has my real name on there, so it says Greg Richter. So if you see Greg Richter and Owen2 together, that's definitely me. If you want to leave comments there about any of this podcast or any of the others, feel free to do so. And thanks for listening, and have a great day, and I will see you here again next week, Lord willing. Thanks for listening. You can keep up with my latest on Twitter or Medium.com. Look under my name, Greg Richter, or under my username, @Owen2. That's OWENTEW.